The floorboards didn't creak. They never did when a song walked on them. I sat on my bed, the scent of the pastry shop's powdered sugar still on my clothes, my heart hammering against my ribs. In the corner, a silhouette detached itself from the shadows. "Are you done running?" Donald No, Jung stepped into the sliver of moonlight. He looked different than he did in the hospital halls. The white coat was gone, replaced by a tailored black shirt unbuttoned at the throat. "How did you find me?" I whispered. "I never lost you, Nancy," he said, his voice like velvet over gravel. "I let you run because I thought you needed the exercise, but then I saw you today. I saw him." He looked at my stomach. He crossed the room in 3 steps, his presence swallowing the air. He didn't touch me, but I felt the heat. "I thought you were different," I cried. "I thought you were the one who got out." Jung let out a low, dark chuckle. He leaned down, his face inches from mine. "Nobody gets out of this family, Nancy. My brother died for this throne. You think I'd let a little thing like a medical degree stop me from claiming what's mine? You, the child, you're coming home." The drive to the Song estate was silent, the hum of the Bentley's engine the only sound against the backdrop of the city lights. Jung's hand sat heavily on my thigh, his thumb tracing small, possessive circles against my skin. He didn't look at me. He stared out the window like a king, surveying a kingdom he was prepared to burn. When we pulled up to the gates, the same gates I used to walk through with my head down as a waitress, the guards bowed. "I'm not staying in the servants' quarters," I whispered, a sudden spike of panic hitting my chest. "You aren't a servant anymore, Nancy," Jung said, opening the door. "You are the mother of my child. You stay where I sleep. You eat where I eat. You breathe the air I breathe." He led me through the grand foyer. The marble floors felt colder than I remembered. He didn't take me to the guest rooms. He took me to the east wing. His wing. Behind those double doors, the world ended and Jung's law began. The east wing was a fortress of mahogany and silk. Jung closed the door and turned the deadbolt with a finality that made my breath hitch. He turned to me, stripping off his watch and placing it on the dresser. "Rule 1, he said, his voice dropping an octave. "You do not leave this wing without my permission. Rule 2, you answer every time I call you. And Rule 3. He stepped close, his hand sliding into my hair, tilting my head back. "You stop thinking about the man I was at the hospital. That man is dead. I am the only thing standing between you and the people who want to hurt you because of your father's debts. Do you understand?" I looked into his dark eyes, searching for a glimmer of the doctor who once bandaged a cut on my hand with such tenderness. There was nothing but the cold, hard steel of a Mafia don. "Yes," I breathed. "Yes, who?" "Yes, Jung." The next morning, Jung was gone before sunrise, leaving a silence that felt heavy with dread. I ventured out onto the private balcony that overlooked the formal gardens. Below, a woman was cutting roses with a pair of silver shears. "Malin." She looked up, her beautiful Asian features twisting into a mask of pure disdain when she saw me. Within minutes, she was at my door. She didn't knock. She walked in like she owned the air I was breathing. "You think you've won a prize, don't you?" she asked, her voice like silk over a razor blade. She walked over to me, her eyes dropping to my stomach. "Jung is a song. We have been betrothed since we were children. Our families are 2 halves of the same sword." "He brought me here," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. "He brought a vessel here," she spat. "Once that child is born, you'll be nothing but a memory. My father doesn't tolerate stains on our bloodline, Nancy. If I were you, I'd start wondering if those prenatal vitamins Jung is giving you are actually vitamins, or something to make sure you don't survive the birth." I was still shaking when Jung returned that evening. The seed of doubt Malin had planted was growing like a weed. When he walked in, smelling of expensive cologne and gunpowder, I backed away. "What did she say to you?" he growled, sensing the shift in the air immediately. "Is it true?" I cried, Am I just a vessel? Are you going to get rid of me once the baby is here? Jung's face went dark. He didn't answer with words. He crossed the room, his movements blurred with predatory speed. He grabbed my waist and lifted me, pinning me against the cold mahogany of his desk. "You think I'd go to war with the triads for a vessel?" he hissed, his face inches from mine. "You think I'd betray my brother's memory for a stain?" He kissed me then, not a kiss of comfort, but one of absolute possession. It was a claim. His hands were everywhere, tracing the curves of my changing body with a hunger that felt borderline violent. He stripped away my clothes until I was bare beneath the harsh glow of the chandelier. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice a low, primal rasp. "You belong to me, every cell, every breath. Malin is a contract. You are my obsession." He showed me then, in the shadows of that office, exactly what it meant to be loved by a song. It was intense, overwhelming, and dark. He marked my skin with his teeth, ensuring that when I looked in the mirror I saw only him. In the heat of his touch, the fear of Malin faded, replaced by a much more dangerous realization. I was becoming addicted to my captor. The morning after was different. The Alpha had retreated and the doctor had returned, if only for an hour. Jung sat me down on the edge of the bed, a portable ultrasound machine, stolen or bought. I didn't ask, set up beside him. His hands were cold as he applied the gel to my stomach. He moved the wand with surgical precision, his eyes fixed on the small screen. For a moment, the hardness in his jaw relaxed. "There," he whispered, pointing to a rhythmic flicker. "That's his heart." "His?" I asked. "A son," Jung said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. It was the most human he had looked since he found me. But then he looked at me and the warmth vanished. "He will be the most powerful man in the city, and I will kill anyone, man, woman, or child, who tries to take him from us." He wiped the gel off my stomach with a silk cloth, his touch lingering. "I heard what Malin said to you. She won't be entering this wing again. I've reinforced the guards. You are safe, Nancy, as long as you stay exactly where I put you." 2 days later, my father was brought to the East Wing. He didn't come as a guest. He was escorted by two of Jung's most brutal-looking soldiers. He looked smaller, his skin gray, his eyes refusing to meet mine. "Dad," I stood up, clutching my stomach. "What's going on? Why are they holding you like that?" Jung stepped out from the shadows of the library, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. "Tell her, Silas. Tell her why you were so happy to send your daughter to Waitress for a family of killers." My father's voice cracked. "I had no choice, Nancy. I owed Carl money, gambling debts. But when Carl died, the debt didn't vanish. It doubled. Jung offered to wipe the slate clean." "In exchange for what?" I whispered, the room spinning. "In exchange for you," Jung said, his voice devoid of emotion. "He didn't just volunteer you to help. He sold your location the moment he found out you were pregnant. He traded your freedom for his life." I looked at the man who raised me and saw a stranger. Jung waved a hand, and the guards dragged my father out. I was alone with the monster who had bought me. The revelation of my father's betrayal broke something inside me. I stopped eating. I stopped talking. I sat by the window and watched the rain streak against the glass. Malin took my silence as an opportunity. She bribed a kitchen maid, someone I used to work alongside, to bring me a bowl of soup. "For the baby," the girl whispered, her eyes darting toward the door. I was about to take a sip when the door slammed open. Jung was there in an instant, his face a mask of fury. He didn't say a word to me. He grabbed the bowl and threw it against the wall. The ceramic shattered and the liquid sizzled against the wallpaper, turning a sickly black. "Arsenic," Jung hissed. He turned to the maid, who fell to her knees, sobbing. He didn't call the police. He called his head of security. "Take her to the basement," he ordered, "and find out exactly how much Malin paid for her soul." I watched the girl get dragged away. "She was my friend, Jung. She has a family." "She tried to kill my son," he roared, pinning me against the wall. In this house there are no friends. There is only loyalty and there is death. The violence of the afternoon had left the air and the suite thick with a dark, electric energy. Jung hadn't left. He was packing like a caged tiger, his shirt discarded, the dragon tattoo on his back seeming to writhe in the dim light. He was a man who lived on the edge of a blade, and tonight he wanted to take me with him. "You're afraid of me," he stated, stopping in front of me. "I'm afraid of what you're becoming," I replied, my voice trembling. "I have always been this, Nancy. You just chose to see the doctor." He reached out, his hand sliding under my silk robe, his palm hot against my skin. "But the doctor can't protect you. Only the monster can." He pulled me into him, his kiss tasting of metal and desperation. He pushed me down onto the bed, his movements heavy and dominant. This wasn't about romance. It was about reasserting his claim after a day of threats. He moved with a primal intensity, his hands marking my hips, his whispers in my ear promising that he would tear the world apart before he let anyone take me. In the heat of the moment, I hated him, but my body betrayed me, arching into his touch. I was bound to him by blood, by the child, and by a dark desire that I couldn't escape. The next morning, the estate was under lockdown. Malin had fled during the night, but she hadn't gone far. Jung stood in the command center, looking at a series of grainy satellite photos. "She's gone to the Zhangs," he said to his lieutenants, "the rival syndicate in the north." "She'll tell them everything," one of the men said. "She knows our supply routes. She knows about the girl." Jung's eyes shifted to the monitor showing my bedroom. I was sitting on the bed, looking lost. "Let her tell them. Let them come. I've been looking for an excuse to wipe the Zhangs off the map for years." He turned to his men, his voice cold and commanding. "Arm the perimeter. If a single bird flies over this estate that isn't ours, shoot it down. And get the doctor ready. If the stress triggers early labor, I want a surgical suite ready in the basement." The attack didn't come from the front gates. It came from the sky. At 3 a.m. the sound of rotors drowned out the wind. Explosions rocked the east wing, shattering the reinforced glass of my balcony. I screamed, diving for the floor as plaster rained down. The door burst open. Jung was there, a submachine gun in his hand, looking like a god of war. He didn't say a word. He scooped me up and ran. "They're here for the girl," a voice shouted from the hallway. Jung ducked behind a marble pillar, returning fire with a calm, lethal precision. I clutched my stomach, feeling the baby kick frantically. "Jung, I think something's wrong," I gasped, a sharp pain shooting through my abdomen. He glanced at me, his eyes softening for a fraction of a second. "Hold on, Nancy. Just hold on. I'm getting you out of the line of fire." He carried me into a hidden elevator behind a bookshelf, descending into the belly of the estate. But as the doors closed, I saw the lead attacker through the smoke. It was Malin, and she was smiling. The basement of the estate wasn't a cellar, it was a bunker. Pure white tile, flickering fluorescent lights, and the smell of antiseptic. It was the doctor's domain, repurposed for the Don's work. Jung placed me on a medical cot, his hands still stained with the soot of the explosion. Above us, the muffled thuds of gunfire continued. 2 of his men dragged a survivor from the raid into the center of the room, a young man, barely 20, wearing the Zhang family colors. "Jung, don't," I whispered, clutching the thin hospital blanket. He didn't look at me. He picked up a tray of surgical tools, the silver gleaming under the lights. "He breached my home, Nancy. He put you and my son in the path of shattered glass." He approached the boy not with a gun but with a scalpel. He didn't kill him. He moved with the terrifying precision of a surgeon, educating the boy on exactly which nerves caused the most agony without causing death. He wanted the Zhangs to hear the screams through the boy's radio. It was a message. "This is my mercy," Jung said, his voice terrifyingly calm as the boy's screams filled the sterile room. I'm letting him live to tell his master what happens when you touch my walls." The raid was repelled, but the silence that followed was worse. Jung had become a ghost, obsessed with the security of the wing. I wasn't allowed to stand near windows. I wasn't allowed to speak to anyone but him. I couldn't breathe. Every time I looked at his hands, I saw the scalpel. During a shift change at midnight, I saw my chance. A side door in the kitchen, one I used to use when I was a waitress, had been left unlocked by a distracted guard. I slipped out into the cold night air, my heart hammering against my ribs. I made it to the edge of the woods, the scent of pine and freedom filling my lungs. But then, a red dot appeared on the tree trunk next to my head. "Another step and the sniper takes your leg," a voice boomed from the darkness. Jung emerged from the shadows, his face silhouetted by the moon. He looked heartbroken and homicidal all at once. He walked toward me, his heavy boots crushing the dry leaves. "You tried to take my son into the dark, without protection, without me." "I'm not your son's carrier," I screamed. "I'm a human being." He didn't scream back. He grabbed my arm, firmly but careful not to bruise, and dragged me back to the house. He didn't take me to the bedroom. He took me to the library, locking the heavy oak doors behind us. "You want to be treated like a woman, Nancy," he growled, his eyes burning with a possessive fever. "Then I will treat you like my woman." He pushed me against the wall of books, his body a wall of heat and muscle that pinned me in place. He didn't use a belt or a rope. He used his own hands to bind mine above my head. The punishment wasn't pain. It was an overwhelming, suffocating display of dominance. He claimed me there among the history of the Song family, his movements slow and agonizingly deliberate. Every touch was designed to remind me that I was anchored to him. He whispered into my ear, his voice a dark lullaby of obsession, telling me that I was his soul, his heart, and his prisoner. By the time he carried me back to bed, my spirit was spent. I realized then that there was no escaping a man who was willing to destroy himself just to keep me in his shadow. 3 days later, a black envelope was pinned to the front gates with a dagger. Jung read it in front of me, his jaw tightening until the bone looked ready to snap. "Malin's father is losing face," he explained, tossing the letter into the fireplace. "He says that if I don't marry Malin and dispose of the waitress, he will initiate a full-scale purge of every Song business in the city." "What are you going to do?" I asked, my voice small. Jung looked at me, his gaze softening into something deeply unsettling. "I'm going to invite them to dinner, all of them." "Jung, that's suicide." "No," he said, checking the clip of his pistol. "It's an inheritance. My brother Carl was too kind. He wanted to negotiate with the Zhangs and the Triads. He wanted peace. I want a throne. And a throne needs to be washed in the blood of those who think they can demand things from me." I realized then that if I remained a victim, I would die, and so would my baby. I couldn't be just the girl from the kitchen anymore. I had to be a Song. I spent the afternoon calling the old kitchen staff on the internal line. I knew who was disgruntled. I knew who Malin had talked to. By sundown, I had found the leak, a gardener who had been placing GPS trackers in Jung's cars. I didn't tell the guards. I waited until Jung came back to the wing. "I found the spy," I told him, standing tall. Jung paused, his eyes narrowing. "How?" "I know this house better than you do, Jung. I've cleaned every corner of it." I handed him the small black device I'd found in the rose bushes. "If you want to protect us, stop treating me like a porcelain doll and start treating me like your queen." For the first time, Jung didn't look at me with lust or possession. He looked at me with respect. He took the tracker, a slow, lethal grin spreading across his face. "Very well, Nancy, put on your best dress. We have a dinner to attend." The grand dining room was a sea of false smiles and hidden weapons. Jung sat at the head of the table, his hand resting casually on the table, inches from where I knew a Glock was strapped to the underside of the mahogany. I sat to his right, draped in black silk that hugged my 8-month belly, a diamond choker at my neck that felt like a collar. Malin sat opposite us, her father, Elder Jung, beside her. The tension was thick enough to choke on. "A lovely choice of company, Jung," Elder Jung remarked, his eyes lingering on me with cold disgust. "But we are here for business. The girl is a distraction. My daughter is your destiny." Jung took a slow sip of red wine, his eyes never leaving Zhang's. "I don't believe in destiny, Elder. I believe in blood." He reached over and took my hand, lacing his fingers with mine. "And Nancy carries the only blood that matters to me. This dinner isn't a negotiation. It's an exit interview." "For who?" Malin hissed. "For anyone," Jung said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "who thought they could tell me what to do with my family." Suddenly Malin stood up, her chair screeching against the marble. "You're a fool, Jung. You're choosing a servant over an empire." She pulled a small, ceramic blade from her sleeve, a weapon designed to bypass metal detectors. Before she could even take a step toward me, Jung moved. He didn't use the gun. He grabbed a steak knife from the table and threw it with surgical precision. The blade buried itself in the table, pinning Malin's sleeve to the wood. She gasped, frozen. Jung stood up, his height dominating the room. "My brother died because he was reasonable," Jung roared, his alpha presence filling the hall. "I am not reasonable. Elder Zhang, take your daughter and leave. If I see a member of your family within 10 miles of my gates again, I won't use a knife. I'll use the fire." He didn't wait for them to move. He pulled me up and led me out, leaving the most powerful men in the city stunned by his sheer arrogance. We didn't go back to the bedroom. Jung led me to the security hub. On the monitors, we watched as the Zhang's motorcade left the estate. "You're letting them go?" I asked, confused. "I promised they could leave the estate," Jung said, his eyes fixed on a screen showing a bridge 3 miles away. "I never said they would reach home." He pressed a button on the console. On the screen, the lead SUV in the Zhang convoy erupted in a ball of orange flame. The others soon followed. It was a clinical, long-distance execution. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I looked at Jung, the man who had delivered Bobby's and the man who just delivered a death sentence. He turned to me, his expression softening only when his eyes landed on my stomach. "The threat is gone, Nancy. Now we can prepare for the air." The weeks that followed were a blur of hypervigilance. Jung had become obsessed. He moved his desk into our bedroom. He tasted my food before I did. He even began monitoring my heart rate with a medical bracelet. "Jung, you're hovering," I complained one evening as he adjusted the pillows behind my back for the 10th time. "I lost a brother, Nancy. I'm not losing a son, or you." He knelt between my legs, resting his ear against my belly. He stayed there for a long time, listening to the heartbeat of the next dawn. "I'm scared," I whispered, running my fingers through his dark hair. "Scared of what this life will do to him, to us." "I'll be the monster so he doesn't have to be," he promised. But we both knew the song Blood didn't work that way. The peace was shattered by a phone call in the middle of the night. Jung's face went pale, a look I had never seen on him. "What is it?" I asked, sitting up. "My father's private physician," Jung said, his voice trembling with rage. "He found a hidden toxicology report from the night Carl died. Carl wasn't just killed in the raid. He was poisoned before the shooters even arrived. He was paralyzed." "By who?" Jung looked at me, a terrifying realization dawning in his eyes. The poison used. It was a surgical anesthetic. Only someone with medical access could have gotten it. He looked at his own hands, then at the medical kit he kept in the room. The betrayal didn't come from the Zhangs. It came from within the Song family, and the only other person with that access was the man Jung had replaced, his father's old advisor. "I have to go," Jung said, grabbing his jacket. "Stay in the panic room. Don't come out until you hear my voice and only my voice." Jung stormed out of the wing, his departure leaving a vacuum of freezing air behind him. I didn't go to the panic room. My body wouldn't let me. A sharp, searing pain tore through my lower back, and I collapsed against the bedpost. The betrayal Jung had uncovered was deeper than we knew. As I gasped for air, the bedroom door opened. It wasn't a guard. It was my father, accompanied by the Song family's old advisor, Dr. Aris. "You're early, Nancy," Aris said, snapping on latex gloves. "Just like Carl was early to his grave." You killed Carl," I wheezed, another contraction doubling me over. "Carl wanted to go legitimate," my father whispered, his eyes filled with a pathetic, cowardly greed. "He would have fired us all, the advisor, the gardener, the loyal servants. But Jung was supposed to stay a doctor. I was supposed to run the business in the vacuum. But Jung became a monster we couldn't control. They weren't here to help me. They were here to take the baby, the leverage they needed to bring the Don to his knees." The betrayal triggered the labor with a violent intensity. I was trapped on the bed, my father holding my shoulders while Aris prepared a syringe. "If we can't control the father, we will raise the son," Aris hissed. But they forgot one thing. Jung had spent months teaching me how to be a Song. I reached under the pillow, my fingers closing around the cold steel of the backup pistol Jung had hidden there for me. Crack! The sound of the gunshot was deafening in the small room. Aris fell, clutching his shoulder. My father scrambled back, his face white with terror. "Get out," I roared, the pain of a massive contraction ripping through me. "Get out before I stop aiming for your shoulder." They fled as the sound of boots thundered down the hall. Jung burst in, his suit jacket torn, his eyes wild. He saw the gun in my hand and the blood on the floor. He didn't ask questions. He dove to the bedside, his medical training taking over. "He's coming, Jung," I sobbed, dropping the gun. "I've got you," he whispered, his voice a mix of the doctor and the lover. "I'm right here. Push, Nancy, push for our legacy." The next hour was a blur of agony and dark intimacy. There were no nurses, no bright lights, only Jung's steady hands and his fierce, possessive whispers in my ear. When the first cry echoed through the room, it sounded like a victory. 3 months later, the Song estate was silent once more. The traitors had been dealt with, my father vanished into the darkness of Jung's justice, and the advisor was no more. I stood on the balcony, the evening sun warming my skin. I was no longer the waitress. I wore a crown of gold and diamonds, but the heaviest weight was the gold band on my finger. Jung walked up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. He rested his chin on my shoulder, looking down at the infant in my arms, a boy with his father's sharp eyes and my skin. "Is he safe?" I asked, though I knew the answer. "The Zhangs are gone. The triads have bowed," Jung said, his voice a low, satisfied purr. He turned me in his arms, his gaze dropping to my lips with that familiar dark hunger. "You are the queen of a ghost empire, Nancy, and I am the man who killed for you." He kissed me, a deep, territorial claim that tasted of the life we had built from the ruins of his family. I had thought he was different, a man of healing. But as I looked into his eyes, I realized he was exactly what I needed. I wasn't just his obsession, I was his anchor. And in the dark world of the Mafia, that was the most dangerous and beautiful thing of all.